These are 5 times when Jon Jones went into berserk mode and completely shocked the MMA world. Widely hailed as the greatest mixed martial artist to ever set foot in the octagon, Jon Jones' career is a chaotic Pandora box filled with massive highs and dark lows.
Jon Jones was facing Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, he was facing Daniel Cormier, he was facing the elite of the elite, and he never lost even when he was doing coke and he wasn't even training. Right. That's how goddamn good Jon Jones is.
I would not have much of what I have without him. Really, like he elevated my star to levels because our rivalry was so bad.
Jon Jones is the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the greatest fighter ever. Period. End of story.
From a dominant UFC debut in 2008 to becoming the youngest UFC champion of all time just 3 years later in 2011, to then gaining 5 successful title defenses by the start of 2013, Jon Jones came into the UFC and completely took over, dominating some of the top dogs of the time, including Quinton Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, and Chael Sonnen. But the toughest test of his career was about to go down. In just 5 years, Jones became invincible. So naturally, when he came up against an up-and-comer like Alexander Gustafsson in his 6th title defense at UFC 165, he was expected to blow the Swede away. Yet many also still believed Gustafsson was the man to uproot the established order. Even Jones knew that Gustafsson was a challenge tougher than any he had faced before because A, he was young and hungry, unlike the veterans he fought before.
Alexander, he's a great fighter, he really is. I'm excited for the challenge. The thing that excites me most about Alexander is that he's young, and I'm sure he has an ambition to win this fight that I maybe haven't seen in a few opponents. You know, a lot of the guys I've fought are a lot older. A lot of the guys that I'm fighting has had the life and been there and done that already. Alexander doesn't have that, you know, and he wants that. So me knowing that, I got to train my butt off to destroy any thoughts he have of destroying my life.
And B, Gustafsson was just as tall and lanky as Jones, if not more, so the champ's physical gifts weren't going to work as effectively.
What kind of challenges does Gustafsson present that your previous opponents haven't?
I would say, you know, his height and his reach, his arms and legs, you know, it's going to be different, you know, a little bit different distancing, and it would require me to have a little different timing. I have to beat him to the punch a little faster because his arms are a little longer. So, yeah, just, you know, little range differences.
Have you been watching much tape on him then?
I watch his fights all the time.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Jones' confidence grew as the fight progressed, and he felt he had more tricks up his sleeve than his opponent.
I think I have a lot more tools in this fight to win the fight, and that's what I'm going to really stick to. Where he's primarily a boxer, man, I really embrace the whole art of kickboxing, the whole art of everything that's not even kickboxing, like the in-between stuff. So, I mean, I'm not going to go out there, I'm not going to say that I'm going to try to box him the whole time. I'm going to kickbox him. I'm going to be like water. I'm going to do all types of unpredictable spinning elbows, flying knees, shots, fake shots, all types of stuff. So, I mean, he really needs to be on his game.
Gustafsson showered praise for his foe too, yet he was confident that he'd take everything Jon had worked so hard for.
He's the best guy pound for pound in the world right now, and if I'm going to take someone's belt, it's going to be his. So, you know, I'm super ready. You know, I can't wait for the fight.
Going into the fight, Gustafsson was a massive plus 425 underdog, but he defied all odds by giving Jones a serious run for his money. In round 1, the Swede cut Jones open near the eye and even took him down. In round 2, he landed the more impactful shots. In round 3, he first got rocked by a thudding elbow before returning the favor with a left hook. In rounds 4 and 5, Jones was the better man, but Gustafsson continued to fight it out with pure grit. After 5 rounds of war, Jones won by a unanimous decision and proved that he was as tough as a nail as he's a hammer, although opinions remained divided over who won. Gustafsson outperformed and surprised many, especially the man who runs it all.
Not only did I not expect it to go 5 rounds, I never thought that Gustafsson would be able to stop Jon Jones' takedown. I thought that was going to be his weakness in this thing. I thought he would probably outstrike Jones, then Jones would take him down and try to ground and pound him. And that never happened. It was actually the actual opposite. Gustafsson took him down.
Even though many thought Gustafsson had done enough to win, the man himself wasn't entirely convinced he'd done enough to secure the belt.
Alex, do you think you did enough to win that fight?
You know, it's hard to say. You know, he's, you know, I'm just, you know, I don't know. I learned a lot though from this fight. He's a champ for a reason. To take the belt from the champ, you need to finish him. And that's how it is, and I didn't do it.
It was an extremely tough fight for Jones, but one that he needed after years of dominance because he was starting to become complacent.
Man, I tell you what, I've been asking for a dogfight for a long time, and I finally got that dogfight I've been looking for. Tonight was a blessing in so many ways. Got the victory, and I got to prove a lot to myself. I'm not satisfied. I got to do a lot more work in the gym to stay on top of my game.
In his next fight, Jones eased through Glover Teixeira before being booked for UFC 178 to defend against arch-rival Daniel Cormier, an Olympian who was expected to seriously test Jones' wrestling credentials. This was also about to be the start of probably the most notable rivalry in UFC history. The rivalry between Jones and Cormier traces back to 2010 when Jones jokingly claimed he'd smash Cormier in a wrestling match.
He just said a couple things like, you know, you look like you can wrestle, go get cauliflower on the other side, maybe you can get a takedown against me. And my whole thing was it just came off so off-putting because he didn't know who I was.
Jones was originally scheduled to face Gustafsson in a rematch at UFC 178, but after the Swede pulled out due to injury, Cormier was brought in as a short-notice replacement, and by then, their beef had escalated, and they were quick to get into a pre-fight brawl during one of their face-offs. And things got personal during interviews.
Hey, are you still there?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. You are just the fakest person. I actually admire that you can actually be this fake and like when the TV comes on, how you can just change. It's like you're a chameleon.
Hey, listen,
it's
I'm
awesome.
I'm a professional.
It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
The fact that you're hasn't changed.
You're the scum of the earth. You are a terrible human being, but you can sure turn it on, huh?
Thank you.
I wish they would let me next door so I can spit in your face.
You know I would absolutely kill you if you ever did something like that,
You
right?
could never kill me.
Oh, I bet you I could.
Then you should try, John.
Jones actually had to pull out of the event due to an injury, and the two were rebooked to fight at UFC 182, and despite all the chaos, there was still a sliver of respect between them.
He has a proven record. I mean, the guy is 15-0. He's a Strikeforce world champion. He competed in the Olympics. I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, to defeat somebody who's undefeated is just, it's quite a thing to have on your resume.
What I respect about Jon Jones is his ability to control fights, his ability to handle pressure, his ability to actually do what he's done at such a young age. That will most times break a younger human being. He's handled it to this point.
When the cage door closed, Jones proved Cormier right by controlling the fight for the most part, even taking the Olympian down and beating him up in the clinch and on the door to secure a comfortable unanimous decision victory. Cormier was heartbroken after losing to the man he hated most, but he promised a strong comeback.
It's no different. This is not gonna ruin me, you know, one way or the other. I'm gonna stand across the cage from that man again, and I'll believe just as I did tonight, and I'll take the fight to him again, I guess.
Unlike Cormier, Jones kicked off 2015 with a bang, promising that this year would be his defining moment.
My plan is to become the greatest fighter of all time, and it's so feasible, it's so attainable. All I gotta do is just stay focused and keep believing just the way I believe, and to keep working. And I do believe 2015 will be the year I solidify it.
2015 was indeed the year, but not for Jones to cement his legacy as the GOAT. Instead, it was the year he put it all in jeopardy. Immediately after beating Cormier, Jones tested positive for cocaine, although he wasn't punished because of an out-of-competition test a month prior to his fight.
Jon Jones tested positive for cocaine, yet you see other fighters getting in big trouble for testing positive for marijuana. That is the difference between out of competition and in competition. Jon Jones tested positive for cocaine out of competition. Had Jon Jones tested positive for a recreational drug after the fight, he would be even in more trouble.
So anyway, Jones was set to defend his title against Anthony Johnson on May 23, 2015 at UFC 187, just 5 months after his victory over Cormier. But everything came crashing down just a month before on April 28, when Jones was stripped of the belt and suspended indefinitely by the UFC for a hit and run incident where he collided with a pregnant woman's car and fled the scene on foot.
He was running the red light. I remember seeing him, and he kept going. He just hit me on my driver's side.
Jones was replaced by Cormier, who went on to beat Anthony Johnson and win the light heavyweight title. And this wouldn't be the first time Jones was going to get in trouble with the law. In October 2015, Jones was reinstated on the roster and was scheduled to fight Cormier another 6 months later at UFC 197, but this time DC pulled out due to injury. Jones then fought Ovince St. Preux for the interim title and won. Jones secured a title unification bout against Cormier at UFC 200, and just a week before the fight, he was suspended for 15 months for a failed drug test.
Jones tested positive.
Come on. Come on.
I know, bro. Fuck, I'm so sorry.
Come on.
Jones came forward with an apology, insisting that he had no clue how the banned substances, 2 estrogen blockers, clomiphene and letrozole, ended up in his system.
I wouldn't take anything that would enhance my game. I wouldn't cheat. That's just not who I am.
Jones eventually made his comeback after serving his suspension, squaring off against Cormier in a heated rematch at UFC 214. Heading into the fight, many doubted him, considering the chaos that had surrounded his life since 2015. Jones, however, showed little remorse as he jokingly told DC how he beat him after a weekend of cocaine the first time they fought.
Is this guy really gonna go to the fight? Is this guy gonna mess this up again by doing steroids or snorting cocaine or sandblasting shoots? What's this guy gonna do? What's this guy gonna do to mess this up this time?
I beat you after a weekend of cocaine.
Despite spending months on the sidelines, Jones wasn't worried about Cormier's improving skill set, as he thought the champ had nothing to scare him with.
Daniel Cormier has shown me absolutely nothing since our last fight. He has not progressed whatsoever. Anthony Johnson gave him that win.
Hey, so wait.
Anthony
If
Johnson
I haven't shown him anything, at least I've been around to show something. Where the f has he been?
That is true.
Where's this guy been?
That is true.
Where the f has he been?
That is true.
Get out of here judging someone from the sideline. Go back and sit on the couch in Albuquerque.
That is true.
Cormier didn't hold back either, calling Jones a habitual cheat.
I do feel he did try to cheat, yeah, I do. Why can I not say what I feel?
How long do you think I've been doing steroids?
Well, you're probably you've earned a title fight, you know, so I imagine you're about 3-0 in the UFC, so those first few fights. Ovince St. Preux, Gustafsson, and Forrest Bonner, or whatever his name is. What's that guy's name that he beat? Stephan Bonner. Stephan Bonner. Those 3 fights is when you didn't do steroids. But everything else in the middle is eliminated.
Cormier went on to explain how he'd smashed Jones' face in.
Sit there with your mouth shut before I walk over there and smack the out of you.
Ooh. Well, we all know he won't do that, right?
The fight was expected to be a repeat of their first fight, which went 5 rounds, with Cormier expected to do better since he was the more active fighter, but Jones was untouchable that night. He picked Cormier apart for 2 rounds, and then knocked him down in the 3rd round with a head kick, followed by ground and pound to shock the world once more. Cormier bowed down to the new king after the fight.
I don't know, man. I guess if you win both fights, there is no rivalry, so I don't know.
Even Jones showered praise on Cormier.
I've always felt like he's a pretty classy guy. Guy to be respected. Stand-up champion, model champion. But unfortunately, you know, I came into this game at a young age with big ideas. And despite how good of a person he is, there's no mercy in combat.
But Jones' shining moment was about to come crashing down once again, because a few weeks later, Jones left the MMA world in disbelief once again after being flagged for a doping violation by USADA, testing positive for the steroid Turinabol stemming from his sample that was collected after weigh-ins. As a result, the fight was overturned to a no contest and Jones was stripped of the belt. Jones faced another 15-month suspension, and by the time he returned, Cormier had moved up to heavyweight and the light heavyweight title was vacant, meaning that Jones would fight Alexander Gustafsson, the man who gave him his toughest career fight, for the title at UFC 232, and Jones was about to shock the MMA world once again. Gustafsson had a ton of respect for Jones heading into their first fight, but by the time they faced off in their rematch, the Swede had lost all respect for Jones.
He demolished everyone he fights. But as a person, as a champion, he's not a champion in my eyes. He's not a good person in my eyes. That's why I always tell the guys that DC, I hope DC wins, because I like the guy. He's a worthy champion.
Gustafsson's dislike towards Jones only widened because of the pre-fight controversy. The event was originally set for T-Mobile Arena in Paradise, Nevada, but on December 23, just 6 days before the fight, it was relocated to the Forum in Inglewood, California after a drug test revealed a trace amount of Turinabol in Jones' system, the same substance that led to his 15-month suspension after the Cormier rematch. With the Nevada State Athletic Commission lacking the time to fully investigate before the fight, the UFC moved the entire event to Inglewood, where the California State Athletic Commission agreed to grant Jones a license. When Jones was asked about the controversy, Dana White interrupted him and told journalist Ariel Helwani to talk to the Athlete Health and Performance Vice President Jeff Nowitzki.
Ariel, I can help you with that. You know, you probably can't, actually. You let Nowitzki answer that question for you.
John, what did you want to say?
I'm going to take the advice of my boss and have you talk to Jeff.
Yeah, let Nowitzki talk about that.
However, Gustafsson didn't shy away from talking about it.
I only feel for the fans. I feel for all the fighters' family members coming in and friends. That's the. But for myself, I'm flexible. I'm here to fight, and I'm happy we have a fight. You know, it doesn't matter if it's on rocket fuel or whatever. I'm going to beat him anyway on Saturday night.
Since Gustafsson had given Jones his toughest fights to date, he was expected to cross the finish line this time round against a Jones who hadn't been active and had been dealing with issues outside the cage. Jones claimed that the reason why the first fight was even so close was that he hadn't trained properly and that the rematch wouldn't even be close.
First time I fought him, wasn't living life the way a champion should be living life. I didn't train very hard for that fight. I'm not making excuses, but you know, this is just the truth. I could have given it a lot more effort. I allowed myself to get fatigued within like the first 2 rounds, things that never normally happens during my fights. So the next time I fight him, I feel like I will finish him, and it'll just be a completely different performance.
And what happened inside the cage proved once again why Jones was the GOAT. At UFC 232, Jones absolutely dismantled Gustafsson, beating him from pillar to post and stopping him in the 3rd round by TKO. Needless to say, Gustafsson was humbled.
John, he knew exactly what to do to stop my footwork and stop my movement and my flow, you know, my distance, and so he just made sure I couldn't move anymore. That was it.
For Jon, the fact that he was dominating inside the cage despite his trouble outside of it proved that he was blessed by God.
I'm just a temple, and God has totally given me the power to be in this position, so I thank him so much, and all glory be to God.
2018 was Jones' 10th year in the UFC, and during those 10 years, he destroyed every old school fighter he faced. But from 2018 onwards, he started to struggle against the newer generation of fighters like Anthony Smith, Thiago Silva, and Dominic Reyes, all of whom gave Jones a really tough time. Reyes in particular was better than many expected him to be at UFC 247 in 2020, when he challenged Jones and lost by a unanimous decision despite the majority of the MMA world thinking he did enough to win.
Going into the last round, I had Dominic Reyes 3-1 going into the last round. My kids are terrorizing me that the fix is in and how can this happen, Dad? Reyes won that fight. And the list goes on and on of people that are reaching out to me.
That was the last of Jones at light heavyweight because in August that year, he vacated the title for a move up to heavyweight. But instead, he took a 3-year layoff after that fight, which hinted to fans that the Jon Jones era might be over, especially with Francis Ngannou as the heavyweight champion. But just as Ngannou left the UFC over differences, Jones announced his comeback for the vacant heavyweight title against Ciryl Gane at UFC 285. The Frenchman is a modern day heavyweight with quick feet and elite kickboxing, which made many wonder if Jones could handle him.
I just think that the time away with the weight difference and those guys being who they are, that's the problem. It's not that Jones has gotten worse. It's just that these guys are a different level of heavyweight.
So much has changed in the last 3 years. If you think of the paradigm shift from where heavyweight was 3 years ago to where it is now, you got guys like Ciryl Gane that can do everything that Jon Jones does as well. The elusiveness, the variety in the attacks, the offense, the defense, the athleticism. I'm not saying the sport has passed Jon Jones by, but I'm just saying that gap in time of competition, he's got to deal with the progression of these heavyweights.
Despite many doubting him, Jones was confident of doing what he does best, beating people and making his critics cry.
I feel like God's blessed me with a great talent, and it's my job. I owe it to greatness to get out here and put it all on the line. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Gane was also oozing with confidence, claiming how his wrestling was up to the mark despite many doubting his ground game.
I got more experience in this division, and trust me, a lot of people underestimate me on my wrestling game, and so yes, we will see this Saturday.
The fight between the two heavyweights wasn't even close as Jones took Gane down early and choked him out in just 2 minutes to produce another shocking outcome because while many still thought Jones would win, not many saw a total blowout. Maybe that's why Jon Jones is the GOAT. The next time Jones steps into the cage, he'll be facing Stipe Miocic, a matchup many believe he'll handle with ease. However, there's another fighter whose fans see as Jones' true kryptonite, interim heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall.
Jon Jones is not an idiot, even though he might act like it sometimes. He's not unintelligent. He like as you say, Stipe, one of the best heavyweights, if not the best heavyweight of all time. Stipe is also 43 years old, coming off a 3-year layoff, and his last fight was a knockout loss. You know what I mean? So obviously he's going to want to take that fight before me because it's easier, way easier, way easier. And he knows that I'm the tougher fight for him. Like I say, I'm not going to say he's scared of me because he isn't, but he's smart in his approach, and he's going to fight Stipe before me every time.
If Jones takes out Stipe and then faces Aspinall, will Aspinall be the one to finally defeat the GOAT? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, check out times where cocky UFC fighters got destroyed and humbled by their opponents.